What if I told you that Scar might have had a secret reason not to recruit Zira? It was logical to assume that Scar would recruit a loyal follower like Zira, but that didn't happen, and instead he recruited hyenas, crocodiles, vultures, and jackals. When Scar was reborn as a fire spirit and recruited the entire alliance from the Outlanders, even when Zira would have joined with the Outlanders, could have nicely supplemented Scar's alliance in a battle against the Pridelanders led by Kion. Did the Scar know Zira was alive? There is a theory that Scar may not have been aware of Zira's whereabouts at the time of the series, or just whether Zira and her family survived or not. In The Lion King Part 1, a reincarnated Scar might not know what happened to Zira after his death and actual loss. Perhaps he could be sure or could assume that Zira was killed or banished by Simba or the hyenas after his fall. However, this assumption may not be entirely logical, as Scar has a spy network that includes the cobra snake Ushari. Ushari, who has lizards that monitor all events in Prideland. That's about as far as Scar could find out about Zira and her end. Let's get to the fact that Scar wouldn't have been able to include Zira in his alliance even if he wanted to. He might have thought that Simba had banished Zira to somewhere far away, or to the same jungle where Simba traveled and sang Hakuna Matata. Now Ushari, where is my dear Zira? Well, she's completed her circle of life. So that's it then, alright. Drought and harsh conditions. During Scar's war against the lions of the Pride Lands, there was a complete drought in the savannah, where even in the heart of the kingdom, there wasn't a drop of water, let alone the conditions of exile. Scar could assume that Zira and the rest of the Pride were not as useful in the war because the Pride and Zira herself were not strong enough. Because how can you develop and become stronger if you do not have enough water and normal conditions for development? The environment of exile would not be suitable. Therefore, Scar could neglect to summon Zira based on the unfavorable conditions. Preserving Zira's life, if Zira was alive at that point, Scar as a caring lion would not have been able to summon Zira. Scar considered the option of losing, which would expose Zira to a blow that could prove fatal. Probably the most unexpected scenario, where Scar cares for his loyal follower, Zira. Taking care of Kovu, for Scar, Kovu is the heir to his will and ambition, or the ace up his sleeve. Scar thought that when he resurrected Kovu was still a lion cub, then it would not be at all profitable and hard for Scar to put his successor in danger. If Zira and her brats were involved in the war, it would put Kovu in danger of becoming the kingdom's ultimate enemy, which again is not favorable to Scar, because then it would be hard for Kovu to seize the throne, having been a potential threat to the Pride Land since he was a child. Scar's plans to seize the throne. Scar's main plan was to revive himself and weaken the Pride forces with his army. Kovu was included in Scar's plan as the one who would become strong in the future and take the throne of Prideland. I think we already understand the risk of involving Scar's most important figure in the form of Kovu. Scar, listen, let's also include your followers who were with you before you died. What are you talking about? That would ruin Kovu's reputation, and I'd like him to gain their trust and take the throne. The strength of Scar's alliance. Another version where it suggested that Scar didn't necessarily want Zira. Visually, Scar's army is very large, and he could be confident in its size and strength, and that bringing in Zira might be unnecessary. Scar, why don't we call in Zira and the Splinters to reinforce our army? Ushari, are you crazy? We already have a large army with plenty of animals. Different goals. Zira's goal is to get revenge on Simba, that is to kill him. But Scar's goal is to subjugate the entire kingdom and destroy others, which means that Zira had no plans and desires to become some kind of emperor and invader. After all, she was only looking at Simba. His death would be more than enough for her than the large-scale goals and ambitions of Scar. Zira was not a true ally. Zira was only a fan of Scar completely. Scar couldn't trust her because he actually couldn't. In the battle against the Lion Guardians along with the Alliance, the reborn Scar could only trust these brutes as they submitted to his manipulations. Zira and the Splinters, on the other hand, would be beyond his control. as they acted only on their own and their emotions, not to forget the treacherous moment where the splinters, upon hearing Kiara's moving and motivational speech, immediately went over to her side, in Scar's case, the enemy side. So this is a clear and good reason not to include them in the alliance, as Scar was presumably able to foresee this in advance. Scar, why don't you want to reinforce our army and call your Zira as well? Ushari, you know, they're traitors. Plot chronology. It makes sense that Zira was the main villain of The Lion King Part 2, so the main villain in the cartoon should be defeated and never return. Zira's return would mean that it would devalue what happened in The Lion King Part 2. Disney and the creators of The Lion Guardian excluded Zira because of the timeline of events, or they just didn't want to touch on the plot of The Lion King 2. If Zira was involved in the war, let's imagine that the spirit of Scar didn't neglect his powers and recruited Zira and her kin. Then Kion would have had a much harder time with not only the Outlanders, but also his kin again. Of course, the Guardians would have scattered them all again, but Zira would have ended up in the same way as in the cartoon, but falling into the lava. Kovu would have to choose between the two sides because he didn't want to go up against those he'd be sharing the same cave with. Through the pain, he would still take Kion's side. Ushari, my successor Kovu will become the future king and inherit my will and conquer the lands of pride. I believe it, Scar. Look, it turns out that Kovu betrayed us. What? Ultimately, Scar knew of Zira's existence, but deliberately didn't bring her into the war because he didn't want to put Kova at risk. He realized that his own revenge was one thing, but preparing a successor was quite another. Even if his plan to return failed, he didn't want to ruin the strategy laid down while he was still alive. Subscribe to not miss new videos about the wonderful Disney animated movie The Lion King. Do you wish to know the whole story about The Lion King and the journey of Simba? Then be sure to watch the video about where the entire plot of the films and also the series The Lion Guard is explained. Also, don't forget to watch the video about the incredible truth about Scar and his story. Did you know that Disney is hiding creepy theories and facts in The Lion King? Then don't forget to watch the video about the creepy theories about The Lion King.